Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement 2. This is a super mini mail call video, and we're going to be opening up this package today and possibly more after this. This comes from Seth in Tampa, Florida. And actually, I'll just mention a little bit about Seth. He sent in a bunch of stuff on the channel before, including the TRS-80 Model 4P, which was recently shown on the main channel. Unfortunately, the recent hurricane in Florida has dealt Seth a really bad hand of cards and has caused a lot of damage to his property. So he told me that it's probably going to be a little while before he can rebuild, and there'll probably be a gap in stuff coming from Seth. But this was actually sent in a good number of months ago. This might have actually been last year sometime. And I'm pointing over to some more back packages over there. There's more stuff over there that comes from Seth. There's also they sent in before the recent hurricane caused so much damage, especially to the east coast of the state of Florida. So I just wanted to wish Seth and everyone else in Florida who was recently affected by that hurricane all the best, and hopefully the rebuilding process isn't too painful. So I've had this package for a little while because specifically it's really heavy. It's on a set of furniture dolly, some wheels on here to help me move it around the basement. When my shoulder wasn't doing so well before I didn't have surgery, I just had a cortisone shot, which really helped me out. Yeah, frozen shoulder, diabetes related, it's all part of that stuff, and it's not fun whatsoever. Moving really heavy stuff wasn't really doable for me, so the things that were extremely heavy like this took a back seat. I still am affected a little bit by the frozen shoulder, but it is much, much better than it was. So I think I should be able to move this thing out of the box once I get it open. So let's see, what do we have in here? All right, well, so we have a good number of peanuts, and they're already making their way around the basement. I'm going to try to get these into a bag, and let's extricate the package, which is in the middle right here. Well, as you can see, my attempt to get these peanuts into a bag, it didn't go so well, and now they're everywhere. Packing peanuts, while helpful, obviously, for shipping, definitely make the unpacking process really painful. All right, there it is, out of the box. That did take a while to clean up all the peanuts, but it's done. So let's cut into this thing, shall we? Looking at the way this is pretty expertly packed, I'm gonna say that this was packed by a shipping store of some kind, which is probably why they used peanuts and not just lots of bubble wrap. Peeling back the bubble wrap, we're starting to get a glimpse of what this is. Well, maybe it's metal and it's silver, and there's a Radio Shack sticker there. Knock, knock, who's there? The 1980s. All right, let's see. We can see some stuff on the front here. Let's tilt this up. Take a look at that. TRS-80 Model 2 disc system. All right, power switch there, which is intact, which is nice. Looks like some of the packing tape is stuck to the metal, but luckily hasn't left a horrible residue, because packing tape, if you haven't peeled it off in a long time, can be pretty terrible to take off. And I know, like I said, this has been here in the basement now for a good amount of time. Okay, we can peel back the cover. This disc system has one 8-inch disc drive installed, and it's this one, and it actually looks like it's not exactly in the right position. And this button here, it didn't seem to survive shipping very well. That's kind of unfortunate. I'm glad the power switch did, though. I think it would have been nice if the shipping company had taken a piece of cardboard and put that over the top and then cut out holes for the button and that power switch there, and then tape that to the front. One thing I can definitely say about this thing is it is a beast. It's quite heavy and funny considering it only has one disk drive in there. We can see on the side here, well, it's kind of seen better days when it comes to rust. There's a floppy drive cable here coming out of it. Let's see if I can get this bubble wrap off of it. All right, the bubble wrap's been moved to the side, so let's take a look at the bottom here. That's what we're looking at. So yeah, that's definitely dirt. So 8-inch disc drives, they typically mount through the side, and if you watch my Model 2 teardown videos, that is definitely the case. You can see the two screws here and here that are holding that drive on, although no, maybe there's some kind of a bracket because I see there's holes here. So it's funny that it looks like it's out of alignment because the bottom of this thing, which is metal, is totally in good shape. The giant fan here, and this is going to be a 120 volt fan, very reliable, but very noisy, similar to what's inside the Model 2 itself. Let's take a quick look at the back. So there's a Radio Shack Service Center sticker, and it's actually not broken, so that's kind of interesting. There's the nameplate, Model 2 disk system, serial number 100138. I am assuming that the serial numbers all started with 100, so 138th manufacturer disk drive cabinet, could that be? Here is the long ribbon cable, which is dirty but in good shape. That should probably be okay to work. Taking a look at the front again, since I breezed over it, we have the nameplate. There's a power switch. That is very similar to the power switch on the computer. The button fell off. It does not look broken, so that's good. I should hopefully be able to bend this little metal bar on the button thing here so I can put that back on. But it does seem like that is the release for the disk drive here, but it is misaligned in here. So it doesn't even open because it's hitting the front bezel. And the entire bezel, which is plastic, does appear to be bowing a little bit, which is interesting because there doesn't appear to be any damage to this thing at all. Like the plastic and the case all looks completely fine, but maybe in shipping this disk drive is quite heavy, and if it's only held on the bottom, then it bent the bracket or whatever that it's in. So now we have to remember that this thing, which if it was fully loaded with 3 drives would weigh so much, these were shipped. Like they weren't just, well, they were shipped from wherever they were manufactured in Dallas, Fort Worth to Radio Shack stores all across the US, but you probably could get them shipped directly to you at wherever you lived as well. So I'm assuming Radio Shack had engineered a relatively substantial packing box for this thing. And boy, I wonder if I'm getting rust on the carpet here. And you know, all that foam and whatever, so that this thing could survive its journey wherever it was going. It appears there are screws on the back I gotta take off. There have already been 8, 4 on each side I've removed. And actually, now I think about it, I should put this down on its feet before I take out the rest of the screws, because I think this gray cover will slide out that way. And if the thing is sitting on its side like this, that may make it very, very difficult. Now I know it's kind of awkward to watch me taking this thing apart on the floor, and it's really because over on the bench over there is the TRS-80 Model 2 still. I still haven't moved that thing to its final resting place. So it's over there taking up space right now, which is actually good that it's out, because that thing is not easy to move. And of course we need to test this, although as I showed in a previous video, I can test this on a PC, and in fact I may end up having to do that. Just use a regular old PC. Okay, yeah, this is what I thought would happen. When I took out the last screw, top is all loose. That moves pretty easily. So what appears to be happening is it does seem to be totally loose, except over here around the power switch area. And I'm wondering if there's an extra screw I need to take off or something. Well, oh, at least the disk drive opens now. There is not a floppy disk in there. I know you can't really see what I'm seeing, but there's just a slot to stick a disk in there. We'll just close this up so that doesn't get hit. Although that is metal. The entire faceplate of the disk drive, other than the button, is metal. It's very durable. All right, I think I got it. There was one screw on the back I didn't take off. And that wasn't it, because it still doesn't want to move. Yeah, this thing is just being extremely difficult. All right, so I'm sure the power switch on the front is gonna have some cables. Mains voltage is gonna run right through that. Let's turn this, get back down on the floor. Getting old, it's not so easy to get down on the floor like this. Oh, it is so dirty inside, wow. Wow, wow, wow. Okay, let's figure out how to do this. And there we have it. That is the inside of a TRS-80 Model 2 disk drive enclosure. Can hold, obviously, 3 8-inch drives. There is nothing that makes this specifically compatible with only the TRS-80 Model 2. It should work on, well, anything that, that uses these types of disk drives. You just have to make sure that the cable here has the correct pinout. And that's what I'm not 100% sure on. but I know that the connector on the back of the Model 2 is pretty standard. We have what I guess is a switch mode power supply for the 24 volt and the 5 volt logic that goes to this. I know there's this bar in the way here, but this thing is too small to really have transformers in there. I mean, no, well, that's not true. There could be some. Down here, hopefully you can see that there are these blocks here. These are like terminal strips. This is to distribute the mains voltage that like comes through the power switch there and to everything like the disk drives, and the extra connectors are right here that are for the disk drive power. There's going to be 2 additional for the mains, 2 additional for the 5 volt and the 24 volt logic, and then of course the disk drive that's in here is already connected. Now I'm looking at this thing and I don't see this thing being bent up at all. I mean, this disk drive does move, but this bracket, it's all very strong seeming. And I have a feeling the fact that this seemed a little misaligned, it might have just been the way that those screws were holding on the top cover. Probably the holes are bigger than the screws, so you can loosen them and then just adjust the top cover into the correct position, because it's not like it rides in tracks or anything. And then you can just align it so that the little door here opens and closes properly. Okay, I'm just noticing something here that might be a bug or something. What is this right here? Don't know what that is. I can't tell. I really have to apologize about this camera work here, and that's because I just don't have a tripod that can get down close on the floor to this thing. So it's kind of as low as my tripod will go at the moment. And I'm noticing that, what the heck is this? Oh, that's just a packing peanut. That's an older packing peanut. This isn't one that was the type that was actually in the box. This is like the older one that's sort of like a piece of shell or something. And then there's another little piece here, which this appears to be the type that was in the box, plus a little bit of trash back there, a little label. But yeah, I'd say that this packing peanut has probably been in here for a very, very long time. And this is that like pod thing. I don't know what this is. It's like a bug body. I don't know what this is. It's going in the trash right now. Anyhow, here is the disk drive that's in here. And indeed, it looks like it's held onto a bracket. You can see one of the screws there and one there, and there's actually 2 on the other side as well that hold this down to this larger, thick part of the metal chassis here. And of course, there's this bar that goes on the top that would go across to all the disk drives. There does seem to be this interesting adapter board right here, which don't really know what the purpose of that is, but obviously the ribbon cable that's plugged in here plugs into this. All right, the disk drive is on the bench. Now, I took it outside and I used my air compressor to blow all as much of the dust off as possible. It was really, really dusty inside there, and every time I touched it, it got all over my clothes and everything. But there it is. Here is the disk drive. Check that out. What a beast. These 8-inch disk drives are made to be incredibly reliable. Like, they are just super well designed, and they're completely serviceable. Like, all the parts on here are completely removable. You can tear this thing down, rebuild it if you need to. So theoretically, these things could last forever. I suppose things like the head assembly could go bad, and then, you know, there's no way to get a replacement one of those. But things like these motors and stuff, you could rebuild the bearings, and there's a solenoid here to load the heads. All of that stuff is durable as all get out. Let's take a look at the label on the side here. So it's a Magnetic Peripherals, which is a subsidiary of Control Data Corporation from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. And obviously this was made in Oklahoma City operations. Equipment code BR8A5J, part number 757-44064. There's the serial number, series code 1 amp, 60 hertz, 120 volts. Now, taking a look at this, I am currently holding the spindle motor right here, and it's a pretty beefy 120 volt motor here, even has a fan inside. And if I turn the spindle like this, you can see that the fan in there is spinning. There is, of course, a belt that goes between the underside of the spindle here over to the motor, and I can see the PCB through there and the belt as well. So the belt obviously is working because it does slip a little bit. So I think I'm gonna have to take the PCB off and try to clean it up. It's probably covered in a lot of dust. This is the stepper motor here for the heads. Now it says caution hot motor, but this thing luckily does work. So there's the head moving properly. And of course, I haven't even lubricated this. I'll put a little bit of lubricant on this jack screw here. This right here is the head load solenoid. The reason that is there is that because the 120 volt motor on this runs the spindle at all times. So whenever the disc is in the drive and the drive door is closed, the disc is spinning. So to prevent excessive wear with the heads rubbing on the disc, this thing unloads the heads while the drive is not selected. So you'll hear that load and unload noise like a clunk as it goes to read the disc and then stops reading it. That's totally normal. One thing that is interesting about this motor here is the AC connection is right here, so it's 120 volts in. There's no run or start capacitor on here, at least that I see. These wires just go right into this motor. That is different than the Sugar drive, which does have a run capacitor, very much like an air conditioner or a compressor in your fridge or whatever. So if that capacitor goes bad, that keeps the motor from working. But this is a synchronous motor, so it's basically locked to the line frequency of where it's designed to run in, so 60 hertz here, which means that this thing runs at 360 RPM with a reduction from this through whatever size pulleys are on there. I just love these caution hot motor stickers that are all over the place. Now down below, I know it's sort of blocked right here by this. It says Universal Electric Company, Owosso, Michigan. And right over here, it does say 120 volts, 50/60 hertz. So maybe this is not locked to the frequency. I don't really know. I'm not an expert in AC motors, but it has a bunch of numbers here, has different RPMs, 1440 RPM, 1740 RPM, 0.90 and 0.77 amps. Maybe that depends on what frequency it's running at. And it is ball bearing, thermally protected. So yeah, beefy little motor. Right here we have the head load solenoid and it says Adrian Electric. We have a couple sensors right here. This is the index hole sensor, so there's a little light sensor down below. So if I'm getting any issues with it reading the RPM of the disc, then it might be some dirt in that little slot there, but there's a little infrared LED on the top. And then right here is a little micro switch so it can detect when the thing is open here. And actually it detects when it's closed. That's a little micro switch there. So when we close this, there it goes. I heard it click as it engages, and that tells the computer, the host computer, that the drive door is closed. Probably tells the electronics as well. I think when the drive is open, it won't try to load the heads. That's the electronics on the drive that do that. We have another sensor right here, and this is a micro switch that allows it to know when the head is at track 0. That's very typical. Even more modern disk drives have that. We also have a sensor right here, which I think is the write protect sensor. Now, not all drives have that. I'm pretty sure that the SA800 does not have that, the one that's built into the Model 2 itself, but it is right here. So yes, the notch on an 8-inch disc is down at the bottom here. Now, this could also be a sensor so it knows that a disc is in the drive, because I can't remember the exact position that the write protect hole or notch is, but I'm pretty sure that is it right there. So this will be an optical sensor as well. Let's take a look at the back of the drive now. So right off the bat, you can see right here, this is the connection that goes to the read-write head, and there is only one of them. So you know that this is only a single-sided drive. There isn't even like provision for a second head on this. There are later 8-inch drives that are double-sided. There are some tantalum caps on here, these little brown ones here, and these can go short. So I should probably double check to make sure that they're not shorted before I actually power this up. From a date code perspective, we have 7826, 7817, 7831, 30. So I'd say this drive is definitely from at least like middle of 1978 or middle to late 1978. Now right here, this is something that's interesting. It's a Curtis Indachron, and it says hours, and it looks like 30,000 hours. So I assume as the drive is powered up, this thing fills up. Now I know you can't really see it, but there's a model number on the side here. It says model number 120-LC 0.214 space UA space 78-29. That's date code at the end there. But I'm assuming that this is actually connected to some voltage rail on here, and this thing fills up to indicate how many hours this drive has run, and it really looks like it is completely full. So I'm going to say that this drive has been powered up for at least 30,000 hours, which does make sense. If you look at the amount of dust that's inside of there, the fan in there would have drawn the air through it, and that would cause all that dust. Now, also, of course, this thing as an hour indicator may have failed. Don't know if it's like mercury or what exactly is filled up, but the little window here, it's got a little cloudy, so it's possible that that doesn't work anymore in this doesn't really indicate how many hours this thing has actually run. Now here's the adapter that's been installed on here. Obviously Radio Shack did this, and the ribbon cable does just connect to an edge connector just like this on the PCB, and it's right here, you just can't see it. So obviously there's some signaling that is slightly different. Let's pop this off and take a look at what this looks like. And there we go, if I've unplugged this. So I guess it doesn't have an edge connector, it has this 50 pin ribbon connector, so maybe there's really nothing going on at all here. It's just that Radio Shack and SugarArt and most other drives have 50 pin edge connectors on here, and for whatever reason they're using this IDC connector, so I guess that's what this adapter is for. I am noticing that this drive has 2 sets of dip switches and a terminating resistor. Now what's interesting is that the TRS-80 Model 2 has this interesting thing where the termination resistor is connected to different pins on the internal drive. So if you're not using external drive chassis, you have to plug that little adapter on the back of the computer that loops around and connects the terminating resistor that's on that internal drive to the entire disk drive, well, subsystem. You have to have the pull-up resistors on the disk drive signaling for the drive to work at all. Now, if you're going to be using that external drive chassis hooked up to a Model 2, you unplug that little adapter off the back, and then you connect that long ribbon cable into the back of the computer that goes to the external drive chassis. So almost certainly, this drive is properly and fully terminated because something has to terminate the drive chain. I think it's going to be the last drive on there. There's probably a service manual for installing extra drives in that external chassis, and when you do that, you probably have to remove the terminating resistor from the other drives and only have one of the drives in the external chassis terminated. That way it all works properly. You don't want to have 2 pull-up resistors, it puts too much load on the open collector drivers. And then there's one last thing to talk about, and it's this little pigtail that's on here, and that's because the power connector on this drive is, non-standard. There really was no standards back then. And I think this is what SugarArt uses, this multi-pin square connector. So this little adapter converts this into that normal SugarArt connection like the SA800 uses. All right, to try to repair this little bent lever here on the front, I've actually gone ahead and removed it. So the drive is on the bench here, and it originally was inserted into here with a little pin. So I just drove out that pin, and the little lever came out. Now it actuates a little plastic plunger, which is what keeps this door closed, and there is a spring and a little metal cover here. That's what holds that all together. Now unfortunately this little lever, which is a simple little piece of metal, is a little worse for wear. I'm gonna take this over to my anvil, which is the flat metal part on my bench vise, and I'm gonna try to hammer this back into shape. My concern is that this is actually just gonna break right off, and if that happens, I guess, I don't know, I could try to solder it together maybe? That might actually do the trick. But yeah, I'm not gonna show my metallurgy work because I'm pretty terrible at that stuff. So I'm gonna do a jump cut and we'll see what I come back with. All right, we are back and there it is. Unfortunately, as I thought, the metal was a little bit torn. I don't know if that came across in the camera. I mounted this in the vise and I just tried to very carefully bend it back, and the end part here just came right off. So I added some flux and I grabbed the soldering iron and the heat gun, and I have, well, reattached it, so to speak. I really don't think this is gonna work. I guess there's 2 problems here. The solder that's on this little flat part might prevent that little cap from going on all the way. I have a feeling that's gonna be a problem. And I guess the other potential problem is that the little blob on there will keep this from fitting in here. So let me try to get this into here. All right, the lever's back in. The question is, will this little, I don't know, button or whatever you want to call this, actually fit on there? Let me just give it this a little clean. It is extremely dirty. I'm very concerned that that soldering that I did is not gonna last. All right, I don't have this pin driven in all the way, so it'll be easy to take out. So let's see here. I'm not actually sure how far this should go on. Let's just give it a little push. Yeah, okay, so it is doing exactly what I thought it's doing, and it's binding up on that little blob of solder. So, I mean, it's on there, but it's not on there all the way. I think it's supposed to go pretty much flush to the faceplate. And then because of that, oh, the pin just popped out here. Because of the fact that I have that solder on there, that's not gonna work. Now, I think the proper way to fix this would be to weld this, a tiny little tack weld, and then use a grinder, a die grinder, to just make this all flat again. And the welding would actually add back in the metal that was lost, and theoretically this should work. Although it's just a little piece of, I don't know, stamped steel here, so maybe it would warp from the welding. I don't know. All right, I grabbed the Dremel and I tried to grind this away a little bit. Let's see if that did the trick. Oh, I think it might actually. Now, I don't know how strong this is now. Oh, I really shouldn't have put this on. Okay, good, it came off without breaking it. I'm just afraid this will break off. Okay, let's reinstall this and let's see how this works. Oh boy. Well, it's holding the button on, so that's certainly better than nothing. I'm just gonna reassemble this thing and we'll see if that did the trick. All right, just like that, I'll put this thing mostly back together and this thing just broke right off again. The soldering is just not designed for structural, like building back of metal. It's just like a lead tin mixture. It's just not. It's not strong at all. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna leave it like this. I mean, using your finger, you can eject the drive. That's the most important thing. And I'll tape this up inside the drive for a future fix. Of course, if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I know what to do to fix that, let me know. But of course, remember, I have very limited skills when it comes to this type of work, so keep that in mind. Maybe it's possible to buy a replacement lever, or maybe someone makes a replacement lever for this drive, and if that's the case, then let me know. All right, so I hammered that pin back in that holds that little lever in, so now the disk drive closes normally and it opens again. Awesome. Actually, this is a problem now, is that this little lever thing is stuck inside the button here. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I definitely made a mistake by sticking this thing back in here, because now what's left is just sort of the solder that was on there connecting into this part. And now it's basically impossible to get out of here. Okay, I got the little tab out. Unfortunately, I had to put this in the vise to do it, and it chewed it up a little bit. It also put a crack in this little lever or button or whatever you want to call this thing, cap, I guess. So a little glue in the future might help, but of course it only matters if I could replace this anyways, because there's no way to use this as it is now. But I'll just stick this in a little baggie, tape this inside the disk drive here. So for a future repair one day. It's funny, I haven't even tried to use this disk drive yet. It may not even work for all I know, but it probably does, because these things are definitely built like tanks. But it's amazing that just something as simple as this little button, because this thing was placed on its front at some point, it bent and broke that off, which is sort of a huge blemish that you're gonna always see when you look at this thing. And it reminds me a lot of keyboards. You see retro computers listed online for sale and it's missing a few keys, and the seller, who probably doesn't know much about computers, will say, oh, vintage, you know, rare computer, only missing a couple keys. Like, that's not a big deal. But at least for me as a collector, I want all the keys to be on the keyboard, and finding those things is next to impossible. Certainly when this disk drive was new, you could buy this lever for like, you know, 50 cents or $1 or whatever it cost. Maybe even this little cap as well if you needed to fix this thing, because it's so incredibly serviceable. But at this point in 2022, well, getting those things now will basically be impossible. And that means that this disk drive, while it can still work, like I said, by just flipping this little lever down with your fingers, it's just not ideal, because you really want this thing to be, you know, to look correct and work correctly. And unfortunately, I just don't think that is going to be the case at this point. Anyways, all right, let's test this disk drive out. Well, I just spent a little time looking for schematics for this, or service manual or whatever, and I did find, well, what seems like the service manual for it, the Control Data Flexible Disk Drive Model 9404-B. Now, when I look at the hardware teardowns, basically showing like mechanical components in here, this all looks very, very similar. All the way down to this, which is that little front door with the lever and everything, all looks the same. The problem is that the schematics on here don't match at all. This drive in the manual here has an LSI chip that takes a lot of these DSLogic chips and replaces it with a single large 40 pin or 32 pin IC. So yeah, no easy way for me to know exactly what's connected to what. So I think what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna check across these caps here, which almost certainly are going to be for like the main power coming in here. And let's see if any of these are shorted. That's 32 ohms, so that's okay. 32 ohms, 32 ohms. These might be resistors, but I think they're caps. That is okay. Here is a 104 cap, so that's fine. That's okay. These are all okay. That's good. That's good. Here's another cap. I'll just go across these large, these are probably electrolytics. They don't look like they've leaked at all. So that is excellent. 150 ohms, that's probably something to do with termination. 42, that's okay. We're just looking for anything like 0 ohms, 0.1, that kind of thing. And so far, everything is good here. Okay, 150 ohms, that's termination again, 32. Yeah, everything seems to look okay here. So I think this might be some time to grab my test harness and let's and a PC bench and let's hook this up. Oh, I almost forgot. I do need to remove this PCB here, right? So we can get to the drive belt under there and clean it. So let's do that now. Looks like there are some large bolts here that hold this on. All right, so now what we're left with is little clips. So I have this little Bic pen here, which apparently is perfect for getting these off. Let's give it a try. Oh, that works a treat. That is so cool. This is so easy. It's so much easier to get things off like that. Okay, so all the wires are still connected. I'm gonna leave that on. I just wanna see what's happening with the belt. Let me flip the drive around. All right, there it is. There's the drive belt. Let me just pop that off so I can give it a good cleaning. Oh yeah, it's dirty. I can just feel it. Okay, well, that's a problem, everyone. That just broke. So this seems to be made out of like some kind of fabric here. And, okay, well, there we go. So I guess I'm not testing this drive out. Damn. What I should probably do is try to measure this belt. No wonder why it was slipping. Wow, this is crusty. I'm gonna put this back together as best as possible here, and I'm gonna grab a ruler. I'm gonna measure this. And that way, if someone knows a source of replacement belts, well, then there we go. All right, so fully stretched out, it appears to be about 530 millimeters. Let me write that down. Actually, I'll just write it on the side of the drive here so I can remember. Belt, 530 mm. So I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever run into a fabric belt like this that wasn't actually rubber. And yeah, it is so perished that it just comes apart like that. What a shame. I'm gonna throw this in the trash. Now taking a look inside here, the spindle does turn. It's got a little bit of, I don't know, corrosion or whatever where the belt was sitting on there. I think a little Scotch-Brite would take that off, and the same goes for the motor spindle down here. So I have to say that that is a little disappointing. Let's just push this PCB back on here. I just assumed that this drive would actually fully work, but it's very clear that a missing belt, that's a showstopper. All right, well, even though I cannot test this drive because we're missing the drive belt, let's at least put a disc in here just to like see a disc in there. I mean, I know that's kind of a letdown, but anyways. So pop that open. Now here is a floppy disk that I have here, and notice it says single-sided, well, SSSD/R, single-sided, single density, reversible. Now you notice what the reversible is all about is right here. The index hole is slightly offset. Now, unlike on like the Apple II and the Commodores, machines that use these types of discs, I think always use the index hole here. Now, with any machine like an IBM PC that uses the index hole, if you flip the disc over, even on a 5 1/4 inch disc, it's on the wrong side. So they made discs that actually had 2 index holes. Now, the weird thing is, it says this is a single-sided disc, but it's reversible, which means it's actually a double-sided media in here. The index hole for double-sided 8-inch disk drives is actually in a different position. So you cannot just take a normal double-sided disc and put it in a single-sided disk drive. It will not work because of the index hole problem. That is just an interesting little tidbit about 8-inch discs. Also, notice that there is no notch down here. Remember I talked about the RetroTink notches down around in this position, I think, for 8-inch discs. I think RetroTink on 8-inch discs is actually reversed from 5 1/4 inch, but I'm not 100% sure about that. So in other words, I think if I cut out a notch over here, it would actually RetroTink the disc. And the fact that this is solid right now means that this drive, which I think has that RetroTink sensor there, would actually write to this disk normally. So let's just see if this actually holds the disk properly. So you slide that in. There is no like eject mechanism or anything, which means that you don't have to push against the spring when you push this in. And we close it, and let's just see, it's actually latched. And when we open it, that flips up, and the disk is just right there. It's very easy to grab. There is an indentation that's wide enough for your fingers to simply grab the disk. And there it is, the disk is in the drive. And if we push the lever down, there it is, it's released now, and we can take the disk out. And as far as the chassis goes here, I did take it outside and I tried to blow out the dust, and I blew out a lot of it. But as you can see, it's still super duper dusty in here. Now I did notice that the front connector here does just unplug from that power switch that's on the front. There's like two little leads here for the LED, and then there's these two connectors here that go on the power switch. I think at this point, I'm going to loosely reassemble this thing back together, and this would be some kind of a future project for me. There's a lot of work to be done on this. I mean, the cleaning is one thing, but the fact there was so much rust on that external case means that that's pretty involved to get that working. And paint work, metal work, that's sort of my least favorite thing to do when it comes to retro computers. And luckily, you know, I don't really need this external chassis. And here's the reason. This right here is a 5¼ inch, 1.2 megabyte floppy drive. This would be IBM PC compatible, and this is just a normal TIAC one that was so common in 286s and beyond until 5¼ inch disk drives stopped being commonly found in PCs. Now the thing about these 1.2 megabyte drives that people may not realize is that this drive right here is literally a shrunken down version of this drive. Everything about these is completely compatible. 360 RPM on both of them. 80 tracks per side, or 77 in the case of most of these, but yeah, up to 80 on these types of drives. A 500 kilobits per second data transfer rate on both of these. And of course on these are double-sided, but they could totally work as a single-sided drive. This is absolutely in every way just a miniaturized version of this drive right here. So what you could easily do is just get an external drive enclosure and mount 2 or 3 of these 1.2 megabyte disk drives, connect that with an adapter, of course, because these are 34 pin, to the 50 pin connector on the back of the TRS-80 Model 2, and you would have a 3 drive enclosure that would be about this big versus that huge external case that holds these 8-inch drives. Of course, you can't read an 8-inch disk in one of these. You'd have to use a utility to image it or copy it, which you could easily just use the internal drive on the Model 2 to copy from the original 8-inch disk on to one of these drives, and that would completely work. It's just a really good option for someone who wants to keep using floppy drives, but doesn't want to deal with the fact that the 8-inch drives are so huge. And then of course also 8-inch disks are a lot harder to find. It's easy to find 1.2 megabyte disks. It's easy to find these drives because they came in so many PCs. You could use a regular 5¼ inch external drive enclosure, like for you know, one of those multiple CD-ROM enclosures. Just pop these on, run that ribbon cable out, make an adapter or buy an adapter online, and then there you are, a fully outfitted 4 disk drive system for the TRS-80 Model 2. So there we have it. That's going to be it for this video. I apologize for not being able to test this drive out, but once that drive belt broke, there was no going back. I luckily have other working 8-inch drives in the basement, and that's not including the one that's inside the TRS-80 Model 2. I have a couple other Sugar SA800s. I think at least one of those 2 works properly. The other one might be flaky. And then there are a couple others that were recently given to me. I think those work, although they're completely untested, and they could have the same problem that this has with that bad drive belt. Although they're a different brand than this controlled data one, so hopefully that's not the case. I do intend to build a little external drive chassis with these 1.2 meg drives, because I have several of these, so I can hook that up to the TRS-80 Model 2 to have some additional disk drives, because some of the stuff on there, it's really hard to use unless you have extra disk drives. So maybe one of these plus a Gotek and an external drive cage would be perfect for using that thing when I want to play around with it. Okay, let's end this for real. Thank you, Seth, for sending in this external drive chassis. It was really fun to poke around and look inside there. What a beast. I'm glad Wade only had one drive, because if it had three, it would have weighed so much more, because this drive, it's pretty heavy. So if you liked this video, thumbs up. If you didn't, you know what to do. And subscribe if you haven't already. Check out the other channel. The patrons get early access to videos, so thanks to them. Names are up the side of the screen. Boy, I'm just a mess here. I really need to wash my hands. So that's what I'm gonna go do now. We'll see you next time. Thank you very much. And boy, I'm really messing up the outro here. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay safe. And I'll see you next time. Okay, bye.